G'day, we've got another used review for you today. This one's a little different. This one is of a device that I bought about 2013, I think. I've subsequently bought another one. They've been really, really good. What this review is seeking to explain is the benefits of a Telstra Smart Antenna. Now, this is the original Telstra Smart Antenna I bought back in about 2013, and it's been really good. Really good. What a smart antenna is it's a device that you use in an area where you don't get great mobile reception from a particular carrier. In this case, the carrier is Telstra. I'm not particularly advocating for Telstra per se above other carriers. It's just in the area where I live in regional New South Wales. I live out on a farm out of town, and there's no alternative. Where I live, you've got Telstra, and Telstra, even where I live, is patchy. But, you know, Vodafone, Optus, not an option where I live. So it's Telstra's where it's at. So that's why this review is of Telstra. Any of the other telecom providers in Australia, such as Optus, who make similar units by this unit is made by Cellfi. Cellfi make the same units for other telecommunication brands in Australia, and this review would equally apply to them. But in any event, Telstra is what I have been using for that period of time. So the story is I moved into a house that we'd renovated on the farm, and there was no mobile reception there when we moved in. If you were inside the house, there was no coverage at all. So what we chose to do was we looked around for some options. We didn't want a landline. How could we get our mobiles working more reliably? And spoke to Telstra, and they recommended we give one of these a go. I spoke to some friends who had one. He said give it a shot. He's had a good experience in it. So we had no 3G reception. So what you would typically do is you would get this unit, and in a rural area, it's not unsurprising, or even a metro for that matter, is to have parts of your house that have better signal. So what you would do is you would put this unit in the part of your house that has a great signal up against the windowsill or whatever part of the house gets better reception, and then you would get this unit and you would put it at another end of the house, and the two would talk to each other, and they would basically repeat, as a repeater, would repeat the signal through your house so that you get reception not just where there is signal particularly good in one part of the house, but through the entire house. So you put both units in the house. What we found, we didn't have a spot in the house that had particularly good reception, so we couldn't do that. But the good thing is that this unit has an SMA connector for an external antenna. So what we did is we got an omnidirectional, non-directional antenna, which is just like what some people might call a broomstick antenna. Put it on the top of our roof, on top of the TV antenna, ran the cable down through the roof cavity, in the wall cavity, and then out, and then connected with the smart antenna with an SMA male connector to the SMA female connector in this. And we were able to get not just 3G signal, but full service. It completely changed the dynamic of living at the property, because suddenly we could get reliable calls, and we don't have ADSL on the property. We don't have ADSL2. We don't have NBN even now. That's not an option to us, but we were able to get mobile broadband, which was great. It wasn't great, it was expensive, but at least we had some sort of internet, which was really, really positive. So it allowed us to do more work on the property. Had that for a number of years, and there's three principles. We love reception on all parts of our property, we really would, but at the moment we really, really needed service at the house, at the office, and at the packing shed. So the packing shed is where we do all our harvest activities. That harvest lasts about, say, 8 to 10 weeks, and then office during the rest of the year. So we wanted to get an additional smart antenna so that we could have service in those areas. The idea being put it in the office for most of the year, relocate it to the packing shed during harvest time. So we looked to get another one. Went back to Telstra to buy another one, and they didn't sell this unit anymore. This unit had been superseded. So they now make this model, which is a little bit more fancy. It has an LCD screen on it, and it's 4G and 4GX compatible. So These are the 2 units that they sell now. This is still the unit that Telstra sell today, or as of this video, they still sell this unit. It's $1,080, so it's expensive. It is very expensive. 2-part unit, same deal. There's an SMA plug on the back of it. So in terms of upgrading at the house, it was purely a case of just unplugging one and plugging the next one in. Really not a big deal there. With the old unit, we moved it to the office or the packing shed. Broomstick, same broomstick style antenna, omnidirectional on the roof, which means you don't need to aim at the tower. Run the cabling, installed, no problem. If you had an area where you, in a house that you had particularly good services, I said you wouldn't need to run an antenna. You could just put it in that spot and the 2 would communicate between them. So that we got that one probably about 2016, I reckon. So we've had that for 4 years. So how have they been? As I said, with the 3G unit, it completely revolutionized living on the property. It was absolutely phenomenal. We could maintain phone calls. What I used to do if I needed to make an urgent phone call when we first moved in, was I either had to drive somewhere where there was signal, or after a while, if it was a clear night, I figured out that I put a ladder up against my shed, which is at the top of the hill, went up to the shed, climbed the ladder and stood on the top of the shed and spoke on the phone call and hoped my signal didn't drop out. By putting the smart antenna in the house, all that went away. Everybody got a signal, which was really, really good. And it was a reliable signal. One downside is if you have a blackout, obviously the smart antenna is a power unit and it goes down with the power, so you don't get signal if there's a blackout. So that's unfortunate, but I haven't had signal drops at any other time. It's always been reliable, and that's across both units. The 3G unit, obviously running on 3G, so you miss the benefit of 4G, but the 3G unit is still working extraordinarily well, and we use it at harvest time. We have electronic equipment that controls our grading equipment, and that sometimes has faults, and we need people to dial in remotely to problem solve it on the computer, and we use the 3G smart antenna to boost a signal on a wireless dongle that's plugged into the computer to facilitate that. And sure, it's not as fast as 4G, but it's well serviceable. And for phone calls, it's not a problem at all. Don't notice any difference in phone calls at all. So at the moment, you can still buy this 4G unit and still buy that from Telstra, $1,080. That's a lot of money. It really is. But if you're like me and you're either experiencing constant call dropouts or you just don't have any signal, as long as you're close to a Telstra signal, and you want to check that out with your Telstra maps and talk to Telstra to see if this is suitable for you. But if it is, I think that it really changes around the dynamic of what you can expect out of a mobile phone service, and even unlocks potentially mobile broadband for you as well. It may well be worth it. Certainly was worth it for us. It's been a really, really good addition to the house. And if we got rid of it, like at the moment, this is in my hand, it's not in the house, that means there's no signal in the house. The signal from Telstra has improved over time. I now get, with no smart antenna, I now get 2 bars of 3G in the house, as opposed to 0 when we first moved in. With the 3G smart antenna, it'll hold at full bars with the antenna plugged into it. With the 4G service, we get about 4 or 5 bars of 4G, which is a preference because it's faster for data. So it shows 4 or 5 bars on the smart antenna itself. But on the phone, on my personal phone in the house while this is switched on, I get full bars, absolutely full bars, pretty much 100% of the time. So while this shows it down a little bit, it does show full service on my personal phone, which is great. It allows me to do everything I want to. The download speeds are very, very acceptable. They're not NBN speeds, but they're quite acceptable. I don't do a lot of streaming, but it does allow me to stream if I want to. But I wouldn't be streaming in ultra HD quality. The connection wouldn't keep up. But the alternative is turn it all off, and I have a very skittish 3G connection, so it is worthwhile for me. You can pick these up secondhand. You can pick up the 3G models secondhand. You can see the 4G models secondhand. They do come up on eBay from time to time. And I think they're quite compelling as a purchase. Even that, like, 3G is going to be turned off in Australia eventually. In my area, it is going to be turned off, but we've got a few years yet. And you can pick these up for $300, $400, $500, which is half the price of the new one. I think that that's quite compelling if you've got no service, because the other advantage that these give you is it's not just at home. I've traveled with these things, not having it on in the car while we're driving along. What we've used these things for is we've gone camping or caravanning or stayed at places where there's been no reception. In fact, we had a couple of trips to a campground where there's no signal. You actually have to drive back to the highway or get closer to, it's outside of a fairly major regional center, but there's no service at where the ground is. And that was kind of annoying because you just couldn't, it was good from one side because you're allowed to go off the grid for a period, but you couldn't even, call family, or family wanted to call you. They can't get to you. Where are they? Whatever. Good to at least be able to have peace of mind that you can ring out if you want to. So what we've done, that was a powered place that we had, and we took the smart antenna, put the antenna on the roof, just duct taped it on there temporarily, and then turned this on inside the cabin or the van or whatever, and we got great signal. So much so, what we had to do is we had to turn it off at night because people were figuring that there was somehow service near us, and they were coming over and there was 12 people around the van trying to have a conversation because there was service around us. So during the day, that's fine, don't mind it, but when we're trying to sleep at 11 o'clock at night, you don't want a heap of people outside talking. But it does work. So it's not just a good thing for home. If I was traveling around Australia, for example, in a caravan, I would absolutely consider putting a smart antenna inside the van with a broomstick on the top, so you can get a good signal. And the antenna that I'm using, it is a high gain antenna. It is omnidirectional, so you don't have to point it to the tower. Nowadays, you can get a lot of different apps that'll tell you where your closest tower is, and that's useful because if you were on the road and you wanted to have a directional antenna, or a higher gain antenna that gives you that is directional, you could point it towards the tower pretty easily. If you couldn't see it, you could pull up on your phone and point it to the antenna. And if you've got line of sight or not line of sight, you should be able to get it pretty close to where the tower is. With omnidirectional or non-directional, you just stick it up. You don't need to do anything else. It's not going to be as high gain as a directional antenna, but as long as you're in proximity, you should get a signal. For where we are right now, we live on a property that's 6 kilometers as the crow flies from our nearest tower, which is where we get our 3G and 4G from. And the house on this property is, you've got the highest point of the property is right on the road, and then you go down into a gully, and then you start to come out of it a little bit, and the house is about halfway up the hill. So it's not the highest point on the property. We don't have line of sight from the house to the tower because there's some gum trees in the way. If gum trees weren't there, I reckon we could see it, but the gum trees do obscure the view. The highest point near the house would be on top of the shed roof. I can't see the tower from there either. So, but even with those limitations, we are able to get a signal from the tower 6 k's away, and we're able to get full 4G and full 3G using the smart antenna. It's really good. So if you want to know, should I get a smart antenna? It's a lot of money. The experience that we've had has been really, really good. So much so that we've bought a second one, and that's generally the yardstick that I place on a lot of my reviews. Would I buy it again? Yes, I would. In fact, I have bought one again. I've gone from the 3G to the 4G model. Do look online. You can find them secondhand. Just check them out, make sure that they work. But in looking online, you can be tempted to buy a cheap repeater or a cheap signal booster. Do that with at your own peril. Be very, very careful of doing that. I mentioned earlier that when we look to try and overcome the problem of no reception at our property, we spoke to Telstra, and I spoke to a friend of mine. He bought a cheap couple $100 repeater signal booster off eBay, put it in his house. It did work. He said it was a little bit unreliable, but it did work, and it was only a couple $100 compared to the Telstra one of 1,000. But it wasn't licensed obviously with Telstra, even though he was using it for Telstra to boost his Telstra signal. And he had someone call into his house one day and said, "You're broadcasting a signal here on an unregistered repeater. Take it away." And he said, "So don't do the cheap option. If you want to do it, go get a proper Telstra Smart Antenna." And that's what I did. So that's what happened to a friend of mine. So be careful with that. They are a repeater. They call them a signal booster, or they effectively are a repeater. They repeat the signal. So you do want to be careful if you're looking to get one. For what it's worth, personal opinion only, and you make up your own mind on this. I would buy the legit version. I know it's a lot more expensive. You can get cheaper versions, but the Cell-Fi versions that are registered with Optus or registered with Telstra, it's going to give you peace of mind. You're not going to break any laws or have someone knocking on your door saying that you've got an unregistered / unlicensed repeater. So just be careful with that. But otherwise, I found them very good. I would buy them again. I hope this was useful to you. Thanks for watching.